Nice to meet you, Gisele.
Nice to meet you.
That was an incredibly compelling experience watching the piece tonight, and wanted to start off just with a question about the title of the piece. The title is, and the piece itself is inspired by the poems of Friedrich Becker, which also inspired the songs by Mahler of the same title. And then I know that Dennis Cooper, your longtime collaborator, also has a play by the same title as well. And of course collaborated with you on the making of the piece. I was wondering if you could talk about your creative process in making the piece and the presence and the inspiration of these texts, the poems, the work of Dennis, in actually the creative process of making the piece itself.
It's always difficult to remember the creative process. I hope I'm not making up too many things, but I try to remember how it went. This performance is a third collaboration with Dennis Cooper, and I guess we collaborate differently for each project. And for this one, I guess at the very origin, perhaps, I'm very obsessed by a text by Jean-Baptiste Choreographers Share, and I guess I wanted to work with several different types of, I would say, ceremony dealing with the representation of death or violence. So it was interesting to try to create an articulation between a funeral and something that would remember a black metal concert, and a pagan ceremony coming from deep Austria called the Kirchen March. Also, for the collaboration with Dennis Cooper, we're working a lot with, I would say, working with characters who would be, I don't know how to say it short, but some type of confused contemporary teenagers. And it was very interesting also for me to try to create a link perhaps between romanticism or late romanticism or character from that period from literature and some type of contemporary behavior and the references you could find, the references to romanticism you could find in rock or metal culture, also in simple things, I mean in very obvious references like on record covers or t-shirts, or where you could find other really paintings or visuals from that time. So I don't remember exactly the process, but at a certain point, so we were, I mean, Dennis Cooper is probably one of the artists I'm exchanging the most, I'm talking the most of, so we talked about ideas around that, and at a certain point, I did a series of photographs with two of the dolls in the French and Austrian Alps, and also referring to these, to the Perchten. It's a region I know very well because my mother comes from there, so I could get access to all that. And from this series of pictures and our conversation, Dennis wrote a play that he called Kindertotenlieder, and it kind of looks like a theater play. I mean, it never looks exactly like a theater play, but somehow. And also, it's the first time for this. We worked for several years with Peter Rehberg, who is doing the music on the laptop, and this project is the first project we've involved Stephen O'Malley, who still collaborates with us since that. So yeah, I mean, also, actually a band came out of this that got independent from that, but so they started to work on, I would say, some musical or sound material, and Hooper had wrote a first sketch of the piece, or a very elaborate sketch of the piece, and then we came together with Dennis and with the dancers first, and with the musical material, and then we did, from the very first moment in the studio, we did a whole sketch from the piece. In 1 week, we did a really what you would call a sketch. And then it took over, I think we worked probably on 8 months in different back and forth. So then it's really like a dialogue where we do something, and then it's eventually, I mean, not eventually, but he would change things in the text from the rehearsal. I would change things in the writing, and the musician would rework. So then it really, from it really, the process is really like a dialogue between the different artists that are readjusting, rewriting, tighter and tighter together. So I don't know if it's very obvious from what you saw today, although I think it's very much a piece that has to be tuned very precisely. So first we have a rough sketch. Of course, a lot of things changes from that rough sketch, but then it takes a long time to really find the exact rhythm from all the several parts of the performance.
Yeah, thanks. Something that very much struck me and is so compelling in the piece is the rhythm of the progression through time, and this sort of blurring between image and action. It feels like they're always sort of the same thing at the same time. And was wondering if you could talk about inspiration for you or references for you in how you make sense of rhythm or work with progression through time in, you know, creating the presence of the piece.
Yeah, actually, my longest experience is in music. So sometimes I think, oh, it was good. I went through that because it feels like really every element, like the light or the music or the bodies or the text, every element is like a music instrument. And how do you write a music with these different types of instruments? So sometimes, of course, I mean, we really work very deeply on the content, and but the musical aspect of the writing is extremely important. So I really, from very early on in the process, I work with all the elements because I couldn't work a piece like that with having the light just 10 days before the premiere. Or it's really an articulation about stage. Writing a stage is like these movements of lights and these movements in the music and in the body, and that creates one, I don't know, sentence if that's the right word, but it's a way of writing on stage where obviously our attention always focuses more immediately on the body. I'm aware of that, but all elements are really very important, and even if they're more subtle or and also I guess there is another movement where you could see that very obviously through the bodies, that they go from disincarnated, from the dull bodies, to some certain type of disincarnated living body, to very psychological bodies. So you have also these different layers of rhythm in the body themselves that makes you feel, that makes very different connection possible through the bodies. Which bodies are in dialogue or not, or in the same sequence. So that is actually a very exciting process to try to combine, to put together and put apart all these bodies on stage. And you will see there are 5 performers, 4 dancers and 1 actor, and they all have actually very different qualities of playing. It's not one type of playing that everybody has, but they have every performer has its own stylized or not type of performing and has its own rhythm. So, but I think obviously I guess I'm very obsessed by thinking there is a rhythm and a melody coming out from the visual, and obviously coming out from the music, and obviously coming out from the bodies, and it's how to create really friction, tension, contradiction, distortion between these different music instruments together. So, of course, I'm also aware that we work on very strong physical stimulating. We use very strong physically stimulating elements. Obviously, the music, but also the way Patrick Ryu works with the light design, where it can trigger your perception in certain ways, and obviously also the different rhythm of the performers. So I guess there is, recently I saw a whole description of how to hypnotize people, and I wasn't fully aware about technique of hypnosis, but then I understood that, I mean, we don't want to hypnotize, but that there are little elements that people use first, so that's why probably also eventually it could put you in a little altered state, because these certain sounds we're using or certain rhythm we were using can slightly eventually trouble your perception and put you in a little different state than the one you came in, hopefully.
Yeah, completely. I came across a remark that you made in some conversation about the piece, and you described the piece as being about different ways societies organize the staging of our anxieties. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that comes back to what I said as a probably first reference, who is this book by Georges Bataille, with, I guess, for the one who would know it, it's sociological book, an economical book, dealing with the idea of unproductive expenses, a loss, how all societies always have space for pure losing with no investment, but I don't know, is that clear? Really pure loss.
Gaspillage.
Dépenses improductives. That's the French, so I don't know how, I don't know actually how to translate it into English. Expenses without return. Pure loss. So he's, of course, mentioning from most ancient society to contemporary societies, and he's also, I guess, questioning very strongly capitalism and actually the losing of that space of pure loss. And he's mentioning all types of ceremonies and in the fields of religion and sacrifices, and also mentioning games and any type of ceremonies you could refer to that are moments of pure expenses, pure, is that correct? The pure dépenses.
Yeah, sort of spending with no gain, and no return.
Yes. So, and how this economical part of society is necessary in the economy and in the, I guess, the dynamic of humans. So obviously, I guess I'm questioning very much the space of the stage and the theater and then our performing arts. And perhaps, it's still recent that art somehow got independent from religion and has its independent life, and for some weird reason in the political thoughts, I'm more aware about how it is in France, but I would not think it's totally different in the US, where sometimes art is sometimes sliding or is getting too close to the field of entertainment, what I totally respect, and I think entertainment is totally necessary, but I think it's a very different way of working and has a very different role in the society, where, from my perspective, art somehow is still closer to, I guess, what religion could provide for religious people. So, and also I must say I'm surprised when we're, I mean, not here, but it can happen that we work on big stages where you could have performance of pure entertainment, where I think it's very confusing for the audience who would see an art piece and an entertainment piece and perhaps not obviously will understand why they would be on the same stage. Or, I guess, artists who are also playing the hypocrite game in going too close to entertainment and pretending they're working in an artistical way. Anyway, so that's why I don't think all art has to be like that, but I think some work has to fulfill this, perhaps, from my perspective, most ancient goal of art in the community and depicting all type of anxieties related to death and violence and any topics we would be scary, and that there is a space where we can face it that is not in the field of media, newspaper or entertainment, but I still think the artistical field has this sociological role to fulfill as well. So I try to do that.
Your own background is bicultural, Austrian and French both, and I've heard you describe your perspective and the perspective of your collaborators in your work as being European. And I was wondering if you could describe how you see cultural identity as European, what might be inside that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working obviously with American artists and Japanese artists and myself. I mean, of course, cultural identity. I mean, I don't know, I guess you're very aware, but I mean, I've been to the States for the first time in 2007, but I think when you grow up in, it's different when you grow up in Germany or in France or whatever, but American culture is I mean, when you grow up in a little country town in France, American culture is part of your culture. So I don't know what is exactly European culture. I mean, you certainly don't have the same access to American culture in France than in the US, but you have a strong access, for example, to American culture, but to other type. Anyway, I'm actually, so it's always, I mean, the only thing I know is that I grew up with French and German, so this is a concrete relation to this culture. The rest, for me, is more, yeah, it's obviously more blurry. What is really from there or there is, I'm not totally capable of saying that, but I like to say that because in Europe, but you know, it's the same in the US and in Algeria, but there are, the nationalism are really growing very fast, I must say. European is, you see in England and France and everywhere, people who are afraid and kind of working against the idea of Europe, what is totally out of date because many people are now Europeans. So it's just, so I say that mainly because of that, because I just feel I'm part of the humanity mainly, more than European or whatever. But it's just really because it's extremely sad how people are getting really very strongly nationalistic, and it's very frightening how fast that goes. So that's why I want to say that.
I'd like to open the house up to questions from the audience. So I don't know if there's someone who's passing a mic around, or people just want to.
People should just go for
present a question if anyone has a question.
I mean, I want to say, I don't know if he wants to, but there is, Dennis Cooper is hidden in the audience. So if there is a question to Dennis Cooper, he eventually perhaps would agree to talk to him.
Okay. Yes, okay. Are there any questions? Those in the audience? Yep.
You mentioned that art is closer to what religion provides to religious people. Could you elaborate on that? I didn't understand. Sorry. You mentioned that art is close to what religion provides to religious people. Could you elaborate on that?
What is the what people would find in what people could find in the parallel between what people could find in the art and in religion? Would that make sense? Yeah. I mean, I'm not religious. I've never had that experience, but I guess I'm looking different type of things in the artistic experience. But I definitely look for a strong spiritual and metaphysical experience, and I guess that's what religious people are always looking into religion. And this deep inner dialogue that you could eventually have with an artwork, and that could help you to move forward in this spiritual quest. So I guess that's, I don't know, that's the way I would put it.
Yep. Did you study Uraku or Buto or old Qui-Gon movies? Or it felt so remarkably integrated, but I was reminded of many places and many texts and was really entranced. I'm very curious about some of your sources.
Yeah. I mean, talking about European, for some reason I feel some strong connection to Japan, but I have no Japanese blood, so. I've studied puppetry, and I had a short time. I was trained a short time, 3 weeks only, with the Awaji Bunraku Theater when I was 20, and I think that was one of the most strong artistic experience I had, and especially with puppetry. So yeah, that definitely had a big impact, and I'm still digesting it. So very certainly, and in the relation, I mean, especially when we first collaborated with Cooper on a performance called "I Apologize," it's very. I mean, when you watch it, you wouldn't. I mean, perhaps you would think of Bunraku, but it's. But so yeah, I'm very interested in the relation between music and text, obviously also to the body, but all that in a not questioning all these different types of relations that it could be. So it's not obvious that the text would come out of the body. There are several placements possible for the text, and I think that not obvious situation from the text to the body certainly came with the study of puppetry already. And the relation between the text, the spoken, singing text, and the Bunraku Theater, that is actually really part of the music, where the bodies of the puppets would be choreographed on the text. Though I got also very interested in how the body can be articulated with the text, but how it can also sometimes slide away, or so I guess we propose on that. And I had the chance to spend several months in Japan in 2007, and where I could also experience very directly Notia, that I read about and saw some things, but I've never really experienced it before, and I must say that was an as big a shock as Bunraku Theater. And when we were talking about rhythm, yeah. I think these are strong rhythmical experiences. When you go in no theater, I like to, I mean, you go, I mean, you have a rhythm, it depends if you come out from a massage or from 5 hours emailing or whatever. You have a rhythm, and you come in a theater space with the rhythm you have, or with the music you have in you. And then no theater is a very extremely strong type of play that retunes you in a totally different rhythm in a very radical way, and then you're tuned on this strange play that is the classical structure of the notia. There's a return of a ghost. So you're in the rhythm of this paranormal phenomenon that is staged in front of you. So yeah, I mean there is something also in Kindertotenlieder that we are staging the return of that teenager about his ghost and the developing of this story. So I think rhythmically, but also content-wise, I mean there are certainly some very obvious links.
It's immensely touching. First, I'm a little slow, so when I realized that the figures that were speaking were puppets, it was enormously touching. And then when the singing slipped away from the narrative figure, when it's singing and it's not, and then this body is not as alive as it seems, it's just a wonderful thing to watch. Be surprised.
Thank you. I mean, you can see also we have there are different type of stylized movement, and they're also very inspired by movements you could find from artificial bodies, from puppets to any type of artificial bodies, from bodies with masks, because masks are always provoking a certain body language. Also, I'm inspired by the way the movements or the body could be retouched through movies or video effects. So that you can see very strongly in hip-hop cultures. I guess, you wouldn't think immediately on hip-hop when you see that, but there are some kind of techniques from there. So yeah, there is also these links about this type of, I mean, when the singer is coming in, I mean, I don't pretend to know exactly how to do the no walk, but we really try to make her come in literally in the no, like you would have this floating no theater entrance. So we really tried to do that.
I was really struck by the moment where the guy who was downstage and was doing these forward bends and then moving around, and it looked like video in slow motion because it was an action that we usually think of as having a certain dynamic, but it was stretched. Yeah.
But I think I'm excited also when you see here you have real humans in front of you and very close, and how you consider them very alive and very three-dimensional and psychological, and how you can also really just change your approach to them as images, even if you know they're in front of you, and we'll try to work on the re-questioning of your in the change of your perception. You reconsider your relation to these different bodies during. So it's not one. I try to make it change. So he, at a certain point, Guillaume, who would do these bounce, you see him really as a man, man who's here, but then sometimes gets much more unreal or disincarnated or more like a visual or a picture. So we really try to work a lot on these movements, of oscillation movements.
There's a question.
I was intrigued by your treatment of things on stage, whether, for example, the cold, whether, at some point it's psychological, it's real, and people are shivering, and at another point there's no cold, really. And then at some other point it doesn't seem like it's cold anymore. And are you shifting from reality to fiction also with these elements?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we kept it. I mean, there is something you're in a theater, but you also even see the light and you see the end of the snow. I mean, obviously we work with not hiding all this stuff, but then there is a strength about the dolls or about this snowfall and about that make you still be willing of playing the game of disillusion, even if there is no question, it's all completely fake. So I think it's also something we play around with, some elements that are extremely realistic, and then some elements are very obviously completely fake, or some elements are obviously completely fantasy elements. So it changes all the time. Yeah.
And thematically, how does that relate to your interest in thinking of violence and choosing a character?
Sorry, can you
question from the author, but how does that thematically relate to the choice of theater, reality versus fiction, relate to dealing with violence and death and those sort of more difficult subjects to tackle in a real way? Why did you want to? How do those two themes intersect or work with each other?
Reality fiction and the representation of violence.
Yes.
That's the question. I mean, what is interesting in live performance is that you are in a live performance. Sometimes I work on radio play or movie, and it's so easy to trick the audience member to make you feel it looks. We had we had a very good Foley artist in the radio play, but she would just do simple thing and it looked completely real in 2 seconds, where on stage everything always is fake. Sometimes I even think you could shoot down somebody on stage and people wouldn't think the guy's dead. I mean, not necessarily. I mean, people could not believe it, even if it's real sometimes. So yeah, I like this very real relation where you know these people are here, but I guess, I mean, it's a much larger question for me, and I want to explain it. I try to explain it as short as possible. I guess it's more a way of. It's more perhaps a way of reflecting my relation to the world, the way I'm reading the world, or I try to read the world and the signs and all the stuff that is around me. And I got influenced by strongly by Cooper and also by other writers like Rob Grillet. And to be very short, the way I got very influenced in the way he would. In the novel of Rob Grillet, and the way he's explaining it, and the Nouveau Roman is one. I'm talking a lot about religion. It's not my main concern, but that's the topic. So anyway, the way he's writing, the artist he is doesn't know the truth on his work. He's not God about his work. So that is very different from the way, for example, novels were written in the 19th century, where the Balzac or a writer like that, where the writer is God and knows the truth, and you, reader, are, even if there are things that are known, somebody knows the truth when you're reading your novel, and even in their tension, you have this cocoon where you think somebody knows and the truth is somewhere. Though, for example, in the writing of Rob Grillet, the writer doesn't know, and he doesn't have the truth as well as the reader. So, and I guess this is more reflecting the way we are perceiving the world, and when you're reading the world, I mean, your main approach to, the main approach of the world is everything you don't know. That's the main thing. I mean, most of your relation to the, you know just a little bit of what is going on immediately, what went on this afternoon, what you know is happening eventually in Minneapolis because you have a cousin there doing whatever now. So you're having fragments. You're aware of fragments of the reality, and it's like a puzzle that eventually you try to fit slowly together, and you will make a little puzzle from a big puzzle, and you really many mistakes in trying to do this puzzle together. So I guess this is very influencing from the way I'm writing and thinking, trying to, perhaps thinking about the elements we put together are like evidences, and I try to rebuild, to articulate these signs like a police investigator would try to, and guessing what is the link between this sign, what is, eventually there is no link, but it's interesting to keep this together, to keep these signs together, even if there is no link. Perhaps it's totally absurd, and then I would throw away that pass. But so I really feel like working like a police investigator, try to put these evidences together, and depending on the project I'm working, I will go more or less forward in my investigation. And even if there are many holes in what I try to rebuild, I'm extremely interested by, I mean, I don't care if it's completely fulfilled or if there are many holes in my reconstitution. And also, I'm working with these different layers of, I mean, there is, I think, writing with real elements. I think you're, for example, in your experience of life, if you dream something last night, and if you're not crazy, you know, and you have a clear perspective, you would know this was your dream and it's not the reality, you know, it's a different type, but it's still an experience of life. And obviously we know since the psychology that this also actually has an impact in your real life, obviously. So there are also these different experiences from the reality. I mean, it's not only me being in front of you. I mean, there are all these different qualities of experiences of life. So I try also to work with these different qualities of the way you would experience life. And also, so I consider the audience, I mean, of course, the difference is that I can interact in a different way with these signs, and I've seen this piece 320 times, so I don't have the same exactly the same experience and you have it, but I don't know the truth about that piece. I mean, I've analyzed it a lot, but and I've interacted with it, but I consider the audience as well as a police investigator trying to understand these signs. And so also the imagination, my imagination or the imagination of the audience or the imagination of the performers have also a strong part in, are also strong elements of the structure. So that's why I hope it could eventually turn into a very intimate experience for you, because you're going to co-write this piece. And this piece is no longer Cooper's or mine, hopefully it's becoming your piece, I mean your experience out of the piece. So, so I guess in this sense, various type of fantasies, or I would say the strong. We were talking about anxieties before, but I would say all the strong fantasies that are animating us, that are really making us move, are important, and are important in the fact that they going to interact in a very strong conscious or unconscious way, in the way of experiencing the world and experiencing an artwork. And I usually work actually with very strong stimulating elements. I guess related to violence, related to eroticism, related to death, and we know this gonna hurt. I mean, if you're on if you're on completely cold, it should trigger you. I mean, it should stimulate your imagination pretty strongly and involve you pretty strong in there. Also, again, just to go back to what we said before, eventually, I think it's important we could be a bit more, I mean, to go very strongly this path in, I would say, these dangerous, or zones that feel dangerous, to go closer to these zones, because sometimes it still sounds like it's still not I mean, we regularly have feedback that make me question and think, oh, it's still not legitimate that this is the right place to do it. This is, you know, if TVs or some type of magazine would give you extremely violent report with photos and all the detail of what happened, I think this is out of place. I think it's totally hypocrite because it makes you feel like you are a good citizen with good thoughts and you are just taking some information. As I think we all have some type of perverse curiosity. We see if there is violence or death or whatever. Obviously, I mean, I think I'm pretty. I mean, I think I'm pretty cool. I think there are many citizens who are more extreme because obviously these media, these newspapers or whatever are selling extremely well. So I'm not talking about a little group of perverts. I'm talking about the entire humanity who has this pervert curiosity, and I think it's not bad. I think we should just be very, very honest about it. And at the moment we're honest about it, then I think there is a way of dealing with it that is more healthy instead of saying, oh, I have only good thoughts and I'm just reading the newspaper and I'm not dealing with real literature or dirty art or whatever. So I think this is very hypocrite and this is actually really damaging for the growing of the brain of humanity. So anyway, so that's why sometimes I think it's important we just really go for it to show this is for me the exact right place to do this. And it sometimes happens that people tell me this is out of place what you're doing. I'm like, no, that's exactly the right place to do it.
The theater.
Exactly, and it's the place since actually a couple of centuries and thousands of years. So.
Do you see that as even more needed today, as opposed to what we might know of other previous eras?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in a pretty conservative context, so it's, I don't know if it's more needed, but it's still needed, that's for sure. Yeah, very, very, very obviously.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for this wonderful piece. It's really a wonderful contribution to the art. But I had a question about your use of the Gherkin, if that's the correct way to pronounce it. We're certainly dealing with a very modern-looking imagery here, and what seems like more modern-looking themes, or at least modern iterations of themes that humanity experience. What inspired you to bring in something that's actually a very folkloric and very old tradition into the piece? Granted, it's only appearing on stage for a very short period of time, and I just wanted to speak a little bit more on that.
I thought it was interesting to make reference to some more, to some ceremonies that is also outside of the religious field. And I saw the Persian, I mean, first of all, I'm not a sexologist or anthropologist, so, and I know the Persian very well because I encountered it every year in the ballet from my mother. So I felt it was more right to display a ceremony I know very well. But that's certainly not the only reason. Also, I saw this ceremony is interesting because kids in their little valley in Austria, very remote, are, again, like in a little village in France, they're very aware about global culture because they have internet and DVD players and all that stuff. And this, although this ceremony is not at all a museum ceremony, I mean, people really love doing that there. It's a big moment. I mean, I don't know. Perhaps I don't know if Halloween is a big moment for you, but anyway, this is a big moment in these few valleys. It's a big moment in the year, like Carnival, like where people get really crazy and party for days and go in another state, because these guys, when they do that, obviously they get drunk too, but you know they do it for several days, and they get really into characters, and they really get their white side out, and so yeah, I guess it's a very special moment for them, and it's very popular. It's really not something like, oh, let's do grandma's old boring tradition. I mean, that's really something that kids love to do and prepare the entire year. And then I thought it's interesting because it's a very good example of super local culture that went through the global culture and how it's coming back to the little valley. You can see in mainstream fantasy movie or horror movie or figures that eventually could look like the person or could look like some African traditional thing or from German traditional thing, or because people who are working on these movies, they do research and they pick up aesthetics from all these parts. So even a year ago, I went to an exhibition in Los Angeles from a guy working on special effects from movies called Gabe Bartalos, and he had a creature that was so close to a person, or I mean, with the correct form situation. I mean, it's coded, and he did it. So, and this came out from I don't know because I'm a specialist, but from a big Hollywood movie. So these kids, although they see references or they see things, remembering their little local thing in super cool, mainstream, huge Hollywood production. So that is also appealing for them. Like, oh, we're on how do you say, hanga? We're on old-fashioned, but like our stuff is really cool because it's in the mainstream or whatever. And then again, because this aesthetic from mainstream movie can affect the way they're doing their things. So now I chose to mask this so they're a little bit more old school, but there sometimes they would do masks made out of wood, but they would look sometimes like Hollywood character. I mean, Hollywood. Because they get inspired by that, but it's totally fair enough. But of course, we'll have people saying, "Oh, this is not correct. This is the real one." But I think, I think it's interesting too, because the challenge in when they create this creature, the aesthetical challenge was always to depict the most horrifying character. What would be the most horrifying, and what was horrifying 100 years ago is not the same thing than what is horrifying now. So somehow these kids doing more Hollywood-looking creatures, monsters, isn't totally wrong, because that's what is for them the most horrifying. And yeah, it doesn't look like the mask from 1920, but I mean, it makes that this ceremony is still alive and very actual and really appealing to them. So then, but we have some real we have some few Halloween masks here too. And I thought, I mean, it's a total normal mix, because that's when they do the Krampus, eventually perhaps they don't have the money to get the cool leather gloves that from the guy blah blah, so they would buy some $19 gloves on internet from Minneapolis. And then that would fit to their cost, so there. I mean, this mix totally is not made up. I mean, that's a real cultural mix that is happening.
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Oh, no.
We don't. Okay, that was it. All right.
You can come back tomorrow at 6:30 for more questions.
Yeah.